Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, the Witkoff Group, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns, Jean Tomasi and Webster, Greenberg Traurig, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Friedman, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, Hap Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Margolin Weiner and Evans, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knackle Realty Services, Matone Group, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling & Sterling, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Continuum Company, Urban American, and these friends.
Iron builders, CYO, point guards at basketball, FBI, basketball coach, partner at KPMG, president and CEO of an $18 billion bank. It's the kid from Jersey City, Kevin Cummings. Thanks for being here.
Good, Mike. It's good to be here.
So let's go back to how the relatives, your great-grandparents, came over to America. Where did they come from? The Irish Rebellion, or was it the famine? No.
Well, no. It was, folklore has it that my maternal grandfather, that the British were after him, and he had to leave the country, and he came over in around 1915, 1916.
Okay, that's your maternal grandfather.
Right. And then before that, my father's family came over earlier.
Now
his grandfather came over.
Now, your father's grandfather came over to Brooklyn, right? He was the one in Brooklyn.
Yep.
And your mother's side was where?
He came right to Jersey City, and he became a bus driver with the old public service bus system.
That was like in 1925, you said to me.
Yeah, around that period, yeah.
Okay. So how did the family from Brooklyn migrate over to Jersey City?
Well, I guess they just moved over. You know, Jersey City was probably the country back then, and they had the opportunity to come in, and they settled in. And my grandfather was born probably late 1800s. He was born here in Brooklyn, and the family moved over. And then, for the most part, my father's family was all Jersey City, and my mother's family was all Jersey City.
Now, how did your father meet your mother?
Well, it was right after the war, and I think my mother, the rumor has it that my mother had a crush on her because they were from the same parish, St. Al's Parish in Jersey City.
Now, you said to me, what's very interesting, your father was in the Pacific, right?
Yep.
During the war, and when he comes back, but there's a cute story that later on in his life you said to him, have some sushi. And what was his comment about that?
He goes, I fought them during the war. You know,
no sushi.
No sushi for me.
Okay. So now your father comes back after the war, and at that time he comes back and he's working as an iron worker?
Yeah, my grandfather was an iron worker, and that was the job he was doing.
Right, a union book. And
exactly.
The iron
Local
worker.
45 on Newark Avenue in Jersey City.
And he comes back, and he and his brothers were also iron workers.
No, actually, he was the only boy. That's why his nickname was Sonny, and he had 3 older sisters.
Right. Now, when he comes back, before you're born, your parents move into public housing or a project in Jersey City, which basically, in the same way as we spoke about the folklore over here, was a situation which I think was more than folklore. It was, you had to be a veteran, and you also had to have at least 2 children, right?
Right. Well, when they first got married, BC, before children, they actually lived downtown in what they call the Cold Water Flats. And then moving into the public housing, and that was a brand new apartment for them. It was my mom used to call it the Arlington Gardens. We called it the Projects. But it was a great place. They moved in the early 50s. I was born in 1955, and the first 7 years through 1962 we lived there. And I got some great memories.
So your father then decided to become a cop, right?
Well, back then, construction work was seasonal. He had a young family. And his father said, hey, look, you need a revenue stream here. You need an income stream that can be relied on.
Now, his roles in the police force, in the Jersey City police force, were a number of them. He was a patrolman,
right?
Became a detective
right, he was a detective for a while. And then at one time, one of the, it was a good lesson that he taught me. A lot of things don't work out as planned. He had the disappointment during one of the elections. One of the new mayor coming in said we need more uniforms on the street. So he lost the detective badge. He wasn't connected as well politically, and then he became a uniformed policeman again after being a detective for a while.
But then subsequently he goes back into the iron working too.
Exactly. And so when he did that, he had again, as the family was growing, to put the food on the table. He did 2 jobs probably for 25 years. He finished up his career, retired from the police force, late 50s. Worked the last 7 years to 65 as an iron worker, full time.
And you even said when he was a policeman, he was also working 2 shifts because of the hours. There were opportunities.
Well, he'd either work the 11 to 7 shift, or when he was a detective, he'd work 8 to 4, and then he would go as an iron worker during the day.
Which is interesting because.
And then make my games or Little League and coach Little League. So
now you always liked basketball. There was CYO, and you really were a basketball person over the years.
It's funny. I started baseball was my main sport as a younger kid, Little League and high school. But basketball is a game that just grows on you. It's the city game. It's a schoolyard. It's part social, part just playing up there. And then basketball took over, and it was my first love.
Now, what was interesting when your parents moved out of Arlington Gardens, as we would say, they moved into a house. And then, as you said to me, that's when you and your 4 brothers shared the same room.
Yep. I never had my own room.
Right. You never had your own room?
Not in college. Now, I never had it.
So you never had your own room. But let's talk about growing up in Jersey City. Public school. Tell me about what you did over there.
Yeah. Well, I started out St. Pat's, and then we moved across town, went to St. Aidan's Grammar School. It's 2 blocks away. Grew up in a neighborhood where there were tons of kids around. My mother's famous line was, it's a nice day, get out of the house. I have a younger brother, 10 years younger than me. If I took him to the schoolyard, which was about 4 blocks away, my mother would give me a couple extra bucks, and I would get lunch money. As long as I kept an eye on him. We would, every season, it was touch football, basketball, stickball in the summer, and you spent the whole day at the schoolyard.
High school?
High school, St. Peter's Prep, Jesuit High School in Jersey City. It wasn't my decision. It was kind of preordained. I was going there. There was a new school right across the street in the neighborhood, Hudson Catholic, but my older brother went to St. Peter's Prep, and probably that was a great 4 years. I met some great people there.
So you're at St. Peter's Prep, and at that time you're hoping that you're going to maybe go to Dartmouth. What happens?
Well, the coach came down to see me. He had played at my high school. George Blaney, he coached at Holy Cross, Dartmouth, Seton Hall University. And what happened was 2 weeks before the end of the basketball season, we were playing in the state tournament in March. Comes down and said, hey, it looks great. Other schools were giving me letters, Syracuse, schools up in New England, Stonehill, Assumption. I was saying, no, I'm set. The coach comes down, says it's all set. But he moved. He went to Holy Cross. And at Holy Cross, he didn't have a scholarship for me. So I kind of left out of I got caught in a coaching change. So
how'd you figure out Middlebury?
Well, it was funny. My high school coach, who's really one of the guys that changed my life, Jerry Halligan, he was a mentor to me. He said, sit tight, I'm working on something. I had already graduated high school. And he went up in June.
You didn't have a place yet.
Right. He went up in June, and met with the athletic director from St. Michael's College in the same situation. There was no scholarship available. So he called the AD at St. Mike's, recommended my college coach, Tom Lawson, to speak with him. And it just so happened, a kid from Long Island had flunked out, the leading scorer on the team. So I applied in July, went up and looked at the school in August, and went in September.
So now here's the kid who really hadn't ever left Jersey City. Now you're here in Middlebury, Vermont, correct? So
Where there were more cows than people.
Really?
It was a big change for me.
Now, so when you were at Middlebury, you were a pretty good basketball player, right? Leading scorer?
Well, you know, as a freshman, it was a Division III school, and it turned out to be the best possible place for me, because at a Division I school, I was probably, I would have been a good player, but I wasn't as athletic as a Division I athlete probably could be. And at Division III, I walked in, started freshman, sophomore, you know, for all 4 years, and came out the all-time leading scorer.
Now, during the summers, you know, since the family had a history in the ironworking, it was a great summer job, right?
Oh, it was fantastic. You know, you go from the collegiate experience and then working with ironworkers in Jersey City. And that's where you really understand people.
Now, you told me you were on the Turnpike, doing
Right.
a lot of work on the Turnpike, ironworking on the Turnpike.
Well, all that bridge work from the Holland Tunnel to Newark Airport. Every year, you know, you see the traffic jams all the time. They're redoing the Pulaski Skyway now. So that, you know, all rod work, all with the sheet metal, glaring up and reflecting in your face, working hard, and you know, you understand the meaning of work.
And you made good money.
Oh, it was great.
was
You know, I
great.
look at my Social Security statements. My tuition at Middlebury in those years averaged around between $5,000 and $6,000. Well, as an iron worker, I was making between $3,000 and $3,500. And I say today, who can make 60% of their tuition? You'd have to make $30,000 today in today's numbers.
So now you're finishing Middlebury. What happens next? You're thinking of maybe becoming an iron worker because it was profitable. It was more profitable being an iron worker than get a first job. But you also wanted to be a coach, right?
Right. Well, my brother became an iron worker after finishing college. He got a union book. My father said, "You're not going to get a union book. You're going to use your education." So at Middlebury, I went through the teacher ed program, and I had an offer for a job up in Vermont for like $7,400, $7,500, and I said, you know, it's just not enough to heat the house for that, you know, working for that, especially after I had the experience with the iron workers. So I decided to go to graduate school.
How did you decide to go to graduate school for accounting?
Well, when you look at Rutgers is a great school, had a great reputation, and they had this MBA program that focused on
Right,
public
a
accounting.
14-month
Exactly.
program.
So I graduated Middlebury Memorial Day weekend. A week later, I started this program. And it was a vocational school. It was just a great opportunity to be able to come out with a pretty good job, and it was short. It was 14 months because I wanted to get out and start my career.
And
get
it
going.
was reasonably priced tuition, plus you had some good earning power from your summer job working as an iron worker.
Exactly. You know, I went to Rutgers. It was the tuition the first semester, 20 credits. I took 7 courses, 20 credits. The tuition was $480. So I wound up taking a $1,500 loan, and then with the money left over from the savings from the previous summers, it was good to go.
Now, you finished the program, and how do you had this decision, you were thinking of becoming an FBI agent. How that, I mean, I know your dad was a cop, but why an FBI agent? Public accounting was important because you needed that type
well, back then,
of curriculum.
the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act has come out. Lawyers and accountants, the FBI was looking to get into the white-collar crime area. It was the late 70s. And it seemed like, you know, FBI, the show was on, Efren Zimbalist Jr. And my father was a policeman. I had a lot of respect for law and order. I thought it would be good, you know, public service. But, you know, I went on the interview, and it was kind of an informal interview. The discussion was, you'll probably be relocated. And I had just met my wife, and we were dating, and I said, boy, I don't know if I want to do that. And it kind of lost its way, and I stayed in public accounting.
So let's talk about public accounting. You know, at that time, there was something what we call the Big Eight. You know, where there was Deloitte, there was Haskin and Sells, there was Pete Marwick. There were all these firms, Arthur Anderson, and you didn't really know anything because you'd never had an accounting background.
Right.
How do you end up at one of the best firms around, Pete Marwick, over there?
Well, I had a great interview process. I had probably 2 firms to look at. It was Haskins and Sells and Pete Marwick. Pete Marwick was one of the larger firms, and it had a great tradition in New Jersey, probably a little bit stronger New Jersey practice. So I didn't want to work in New York.
You never wanted to come to New York?
That's right. I didn't want to.
You really didn't want to?
No, not at that time. I finished up in New York, but
Right,
I
but-
certainly fought moving into the big time,
So
the big city.
And at that time, I mean, the headquarters for all the public accounting firms was Newark.
Sure.
It wasn't before Roseland, where
Right.
everybody migrated to Roseland. So you started in Newark, but you said to me, because later on you specialized in banking, originally you even had Frank Briscoe. You were doing construction financing.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. My first big engagement, day one out of the box, was the Frank Briscoe Company. And they're the company that built the original Giant Stadium, the racetrack, did the renovations at Newark Airport, did the headquarters for AT&T out in Basking Ridge, had national organizations. I've been on job sites in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Bethesda. I was on the Cape Canaveral launch pad when they converted from the Apollo to the shuttle. And it was a pretty exciting job. Again, dealing with different people, not just the suits. You're dealing with project managers and different people.
Coupled with you understood because you were an ironworker.
Exactly.
So I mean, you could apply, and when you see that, you really feel good. It's like when I walk around the city and I see the construction of buildings, I always am amazed and I really enjoy it. How do you get involved with banking at the Pete Marwick?
Well, Pete Marwick had a great bank practice in New Jersey. At one time, I think they did 75% of the deposits. So it was really getting to know different people as you're an assistant, staff accountant, your first couple of years, you get a little dabble in it, and then you develop relationships with, the more senior people, and next thing you know, I'm banking full time. But I had a lot of different companies. I worked in some of the biotechnology areas, coming up through the firm, and I did an IPO back in the mid-'80s, Rayometrics. It was a good experience for me.
But the majority of your involvement at Pete Marwick, which subsequently became KPMG, was some of the major banks in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And which is very interesting because a number of these people later on had an effect on your career because you meet them again in different positions. Because in the 80s and in the early 90s, banks were merging. They were merging, and Pete Marwick was involved with the merger acquisitions. I mean, UJB, Summit, and a variety.
Well, between UJB, Summit, and then there was an accounting term called pooling of interests. It really made these mergers a lot more financially appealing versus the purchase accounting and the dilution to the tangible book value. So these transactions and all the complications, it was a great experience. I mean, working with the investment bankers on all the deals and structuring the deals was very helpful to me.
So now this is the time of mergers, and is a major merger. A bank called Deutsche Bank is buying Bankers Trust Company, which was a great institution who I used to even do some consulting for. And Kevin Cummings is now told, come to New York City a little bit more. And what happens? You travel around the world a little bit on that.
Well, it's tag your writ. I had a pretty good reputation with the M&A work in New Jersey, and they needed someone to work on the transition of the transaction, which was a major transaction. So I ran a project management office for that merger, for the accounting for that merger, and traveled all over the world. One trip was I left New York City for a meeting in Frankfurt on Tuesday, Sydney on Wednesday, Singapore on Thursday, and then Tokyo on Friday. So I went around the world in 6 days.
Boy, you come back, and now you're really, even though you were Jersey, you're now in New York.
Yeah.
You're back in New York over here, and you're involved with Citibank and a variety of other institutions, and you're 26 years at the bank. What happens?
Well, I was 26 years at the firm, and what happened was, you're in the big time now, and I was sort of like a big fish in a small pond over in New Jersey, and then I'm one of 50 financial services partners, and I think I had to make a decision. Do you stay here and ratchet up your game, because I was dealing with HSBC, Citibank, Deutsche Bank, or or do you look for other opportunities? And actually, at the end of my 25th year, my 24th year, I got a great bonus, had a great salary increase. And then in my 25th year, the firm didn't have as good a year. It was the only year in my career that I didn't have a raise. So following that, in March, on St. Patrick's Day in March of 2003, I got a call from one of my former partners who's a headhunter. And he says, Investors is looking for a COO. Do you know anyone?
Right. So now, Investors in 2003 was a sleepy little bank with, what, 450 employees over there?
Probably under 400 at that time. It was 42 branches, about $5.2 billion in assets.
A mutual bank, a mutual savings bank.
With 80% of its assets in securities. It has a $725 million loan portfolio.
Now, what was interesting was a number of the people who were at Investors had an accounting relationship, right?
Sure.
And a KPMG relationship.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. At one time, the chairman was Pat Grant, who was a partner that I'd worked with in Short Hills. The lead director and audit committee chair was John Kirkpatrick, who was the managing partner of the Short Hills office, who made me a partner in 1989. I was the CEO. Tom Splain was our CFO, and Kelly Pecoraro was our chief accounting officer. So it has a rich Pete Malwick tradition.
how does your wife take the decision that you want to leave partner at Pete Malwick, KPMG at this time, to come to this small little bank in New Jersey? I mean, you were living in Summit, you knew the market. How did she accept this?
Well, it was the commute. I mean, part of it was the commute. The quality of life improved. But it was really, at 48, when I made this change, it's really your best years are 45 to 55, I believe. And at 48, this was a new challenge and a new opportunity. And it kind of ignited my enthusiasm and excitement about going to work every day. Because, like I said, there was so much potential there, had a lot of capital, but it really wasn't a bank yet. It was more of a fixed income hedge fund. And it was a great opportunity.
And it was also a time that the bank, besides bringing you in, there was a guy by the name of Dominic Kama who came over, who was previously a regulator. He had joined. So you joined the bank at this time as the Executive Vice President, Chief Operating Officer.
Right.
What happens later?
Well, Dominic and I were charged with changing the direction of the bank. And one of the terms we used was evolution, not revolution. We had an off-site strategic plan in 2003, and we laid out the plan for the next 3-4 years. And part of that was doing an initial IPO in 2005, where we raised $500 million. And then it was not only changing the business and the balance sheet, changing the strategy.
The culture.
It's changing the culture.
Because I was reading in one of the articles that you were quoted that you had these 42 branches, and later on, most of the branch managers didn't stay because they had a different type of culture.
Well, like we said evolution, not revolution. We moved a lot of them into different positions in the bank. Maybe some stepped down as assistant managers, some maybe moved into operations. But at the time, we grew a little bit. Of the 45 branch managers, probably in 2005 when we went public, 9 are still in the retail system at their present job. And then we have some good success stories, but it was difficult.
So now the bank, who really only invested in securities, decides to lend money? How was that, the evolution talk?
Well, it was managing risk. I think the board in 2003 avoided risk because most of the assets were invested in government-backed securities, MBSs. And it was, again, step by step. First, migrating the cash flows from the securities portfolio into residential loans. And then in 2004, 2005, we started our commercial real estate group. Now, the good thing is we started construction lending in 2005, 2006. The bad thing is we started in 2005 and 2006. But we hired a great chief lending officer in Rich Spangler, and we muscled our way through that. And now our loan portfolio, commercial loan portfolio, is $7.6 billion.
Now, when do you become the president and CEO?
January of 2008. My predecessor, Bob Cashel, we call him the architect. And me and Dom are the builders, Rich Spangler and the management team are the builders.
So he retires?
He retires and becomes chairman.
You've been written up by New Jersey Biz as in the real estate and finance as one of the only banker in that area, and then you were also recognized by Ernst & Young as an entrepreneur a couple of years ago. The bank, when you joined the bank, it was like $4 billion?
5.2.
5.2 billion. And today the assets?
Just shy of 18 billion, about $17.5 billion.
Part of growing a bank and growing the culture is to figure out the right acquisitions. And so you did this mutual, the first conversion over there, and then you went out and you took some other acquisitions. And you even then came to the Apple. You opened up a loan production office in New York. And then how was the transition to take Roma and some of the other banks and then to take Marathon and Brooklyn Federal?
Well, the Marathon and the Brooklyn Fed acquisitions, they really put our flag into the Brooklyn Queens marketplace. So they've been great acquisitions for us. The Roma and the GCF acquisitions expanded us into the Philadelphia, the suburban New Jersey, Philadelphian market. So they were very strategic acquisitions that were very reasonably priced. We've done 8 acquisitions in the last 6 years, and we only have $77 million of goodwill on the books. And those were mainly deposit deals with over $4 billion of deposits for less than 2% premium.
And then a couple of months ago, it was time to raise a couple more dollars, right?
A few pennies, yeah.
So how much did you raise then?
We raised $2.2 billion for 60% of the company. We did one of the largest second steps in the history of the thrift industry.
Where does the bank see the future, and where does Kevin Cummings see the future for himself and so on?
I'll tell you, the future is very bright for the bank. The future is very bright for Kevin Cummings. But we have to continue to improve. It's very important for us. We were a growth company the last 4 or 5 years. Now you begin to level off. We got to strengthen. We have to do everything that we've done in the last 5 years, have to do it better. And then we have to become innovators and be creators of value for our shareholders.
And you're still playing basketball, right? You still have
Saturday mornings.
You still play basketball with some of your buddies from KPMG, right?
Yeah, well, a couple people play, but more importantly, it's a good crew. Probably the average age is probably early 50s. We have one gentleman that's 69 that plays, and then we go to breakfast at a local diner in town.
Let's talk about the family. You've been married how many years?
33 years.
Your wife's name?
Patricia.
And how many children?
4.
Tell me the children, what
Katie's
do they do?
the oldest. She's 29.
What does Katie do?
She runs an employee benefits consulting business after a 5-year stint with Unum. She's the high school coach at Oak Knoll in Summit, New Jersey.
High school coach basketball?
Varsity basketball coach, 1,000-point scorer in high school. Kevin, he did crew at Holy Cross. He's actually in Germany now at an offsite for his company. He works with a consulting/private equity company based in London. Mary worked at the bank for 2 years. She's 25. She just, I fired her from the bank because I wanted her to go back to school, and she's a student at the University of North Carolina. She's a Tar Heel in the MBA program down there. And my youngest, Will, just graduated Holy Cross, and he's on his way to
learn
work
the
in
real
estate business.
And one thing that you and I both enjoy is understanding to give, to go giving.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I think in business, being a good corporate citizen is really a competitive advantage. And you create value by giving back. Winston Churchill once said, you make a living by what you get, you make a life by what you give back. And being in the position that we are now with our foundation, that during that second IPO, we put another $20 million in it. We have a $60 million foundation where we can make a real difference in the communities that we serve. But more importantly, it's a rallying cry for our employees so that they can feel like leaders in the community and they can give back. They supply the talent and the time, and the bank and the foundation supply the treasure.
Great. Happy you were here today. Thanks.
Good to be here.